You ever read a message from the government and think, okay, that makes sense, I can do that, and then another one just makes you feel kind of angry or stressed out? Well, today, we're diving into the hidden power of the words our public institutions use. We're going to see how the way they talk can either build bridges of trust or dig these deep trenches of division. So, this is the big question, right? The central puzzle we're going to tackle. The words used in public service, they aren't just background noise. No way. They are actively shaping how we see the world, how much we trust our institutions, and, whether we're willing to work together. And the answer might be hiding in plain sight, in the kind of language we usually just gloss over. Okay, now hold that thought and check out this quote. It seems totally unrelated, doesn't it? A social work office that feels like a fortress. But I promise you, there's a powerful connection between these two things, and it reveals something fundamental about how our public services talk to us and even how they talk to themselves. Let's start with a situation we all lived through, the COVID-19 pandemic. Researchers took a really close look at the different ways health authorities were speaking to the public, and what they found is basically a masterclass in the psychology of communication. So a major study found that there were two completely different approaches going on. On one side, you have what's called self-efficacy messaging. That's the language of empowerment. It gives you clear, simple things you can actually do and makes you feel capable, like you're in control. But on the other side, you've got messages built on fear and, well, moralizing, the kind that focuses on blame, guilt, and all the scary things that could happen. And the public's reaction? It was telling. The empowering, you can do this messages were seen as overwhelmingly positive. When people were told what to do and why in a direct way, they thought the advice was sensible and they were totally on board. It built confidence. But the messages based on fear, they completely backfired. Instead of making people more cautious, a lot of them saw it for what it was, an attempt to manipulate them. People just dismissed it as propaganda, or, like this person said, just scare tactics they were going to ignore. And the moralizing messages? They did even worse. You know the ones, the ads designed to make you feel guilty if you didn't follow the rules. Well, the public was harsh. People called it what it felt like, unnecessary emotional blackmail. And this is where the real damage was done. This approach didn't just fail to convince people, it actually caused harm. I mean, people who were following all the rules felt like they were being unfairly attacked, and that just led to guilt and resentment. It turned a public health issue into this personal burden of blame. So the bottom line was this. The very language that was supposed to create a unified response did the exact opposite. It created an us versus them mindset, the good people who follow the rules versus the bad people who don't. It literally tore apart social cohesion. Okay, so let's jump to our second puzzle and see how this all connects. Remember that fortress atmosphere in the social work office? Well, it turns out that feeling wasn't an accident. It's a direct result of the language being used inside the institution itself. To really get this, we need a quick dive into linguistics. There's this idea called a conceptual metaphor, which is basically how we understand one thing by thinking about it in terms of another. So, for example, we don't just talk about time like it's money in our heads. Time is money. We spend it, we waste it, we invest it. These metaphors aren't just words, they actually structure how we think. So, when linguists started analyzing the everyday, casual language of social workers, they found this incredibly powerful and consistent metaphor running through everything. Deep in the profession's DNA is the idea that social work is war. And this isn't some abstract theory, you guys. Just look at the language. Social workers are called frontline workers. They have strategy meetings before an intervention. They talk about going into a family's home. They're trying to hold a case to stop it from blowing. Every single one of these phrases comes straight from the language of military conflict and siege warfare. So what is the connection here? What does a public health ad have to do with the internal jargon of social work? Well, they are two sides of the very same coin, and they reveal a really dangerous pattern in how our institutions see their role. This lays it out perfectly. In the COVID campaign, the fear and blame created public polarization. It created an other. In social work, the language of war creates a fortress mentality. You see the pattern? In both cases, the language creates the exact same deep psychological divide. It's us versus them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if this language is pointed outwards at the public or used internally between colleagues. The result is the same. It builds walls. It creates this adversarial relationship that completely undermines the whole point of public service, which is supposed to be about collaboration, support, and trust. Look, this isn't just some interesting academic exercise. The words our public institutions pick have real, tangible costs for all of us. And it all boils down to one critical thing: trust. Let's just go back to that COVID study for a second. When they asked people what makes a health message effective, the second most popular answer from over a third of people was that it came from a reliable source. Trust in who's speaking is absolutely critical. And this is exactly why this all matters so much. When our institutions use the language of conflict, of blame, of a siege, they are actively damaging their own reliability. They chip away at the very trust they need to function, which makes every single collective challenge we face, from a pandemic to social care, that much harder to solve. So the next time you hear a public message or read about a public service, I want you to listen, like really listen to the words being used, and ask yourself, is this language building a bridge or is it building a fortress? Is it designed to empower us to work together or is it preparing for a battle? Because the words we choose, they don't just describe our reality, they are actively creating it.